Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. For this year's Republic Day, 10 heads of states and government from the ASEAN member states will share the stage with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Ramnath Kovind. This is for the first time that not one but 10 world leaders will be the chief guests at the annual Republic Day parade. The historic gathering will come just 2 months after Modi visited Manila to attend the ASEAN summit, which coincided with the 25th anniversary of India becoming a sectoral partner of ASEAN. To mark the silver jubilee of India-ASEAN bilateral ties, India will be hosting a commemorative summit on the theme Shared Values, Common Destiny on the 25th of January. Prime Minister Modi is also set to hold 9 bilateral meetings with leaders of Southeast Asian countries on the sidelines of the India-ASEAN commemorative summit, which will have a focus on counter-terrorism, security and connectivity. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the key focus areas at the summit and the way ahead for India-ASEAN ties. Joining me on the program today are CommodoreC Uday Bhaskar, Director, Society for Policy Studies, SR Tayal, former diplomat, and Pramit Chaudhuri, foreign editor of the Hindustan Times. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, I'd like to begin with you first, of course. What can we expect from the India-ASEAN commemorative summit?
I think first of all, it's a very strong message of a political commitment of the government of India and particularly the Modi government for our Act East policy and to have more and more interaction with ASEAN countries, all 10 of them. Now, as it has been said, it is 3 C's: culture, connectivity and commerce. Now, I believe that a lot needs to be done together and much of it perhaps by India. In connectivity, I think trilateral highway is very important and we must put a lot of assistance to Myanmar that segment is completed so that we have trilateral highway to Thailand. On RCEP, I think we need some understanding by our interlocutors in ASEAN. The regional comprehensive economic partnership, that negotiations are proceeding, they are proceeding well, but perhaps there are challenges which need to be addressed. Now, we have strategic partnership with ASEAN, which was established 5 years back. But I believe that the strategic content needs to be increased. And the focus is still more and more on commerce, on investment, how India can become part of the value chains of these countries because they are galloping ahead and their economies have been able to integrate themselves with the Chinese economy so that they are able to benefit with the growth of China.
Sure.
And where we have not been able to really benefit. So there are many challenges where we'll need to work together with ASEAN leaders.
Sure. You know, it's a very valid point that the ambassador has made, Commodore. How do we improve our strategic ties with these ASEAN countries? What needs to be done?
Frank, to my mind, when you say what should be done to improve the strategic ties, to me, it would appear that we need to have the kind of interaction with them whereby the dependency index of the ASEAN countries as a collective of 10 in relation to India is steadily enhanced. And this is across the board, the political, the security strategic and the trade. And I think just to pick up the point made by Ambassador Tayal, I think trade is really the weakest, shall we say, leg. Because there is no doubt that in terms of the politics, as also the security kind of correspondence, India and ASEAN have a fairly robust relationship. But trade is where I think for ASEAN as a collective of 10 countries and India as an entity, the total GDP is closer to $5 trillion. But if you look at the total bilateral trade, I have figures for 2016, it's below $80 billion. I mean, that's peanuts is the word that comes to mind. So I think India, particularly more than ASEAN, needs to prioritize this. And if you look at it from ASEAN's perspective, India accounts for just 2.6% of their overall trade with all the major trading partners of the world. Intra-ASEAN trade is a fairly large segment, but otherwise the major trading partners are China, United States, Japan, South Korea. All of them are above India.
You know, as far as economic ties, the finance minister has stressed that the onus could be on infrastructure. Do you believe that's the way forward?
I really believe that that's not the way forward, that the way forward is to get the Indian private sector and the Indian chambers of commerce to look at RCEP, make it a flagship, and before the Modi government finishes its tenure, which is now about a year plus, this should be given the highest priority. The infrastructure can follow. I think it is because of the current mood in the global environment, where even Prime Minister referred to this at Davos. Protectionism and easy bilaterals are now the preferred mode. India shouldn't lose the RCEP bus. It can happen. ASEAN might just get fed up. You'll have a hard deadline, end of 2018. So if we don't get our act together, I think we may miss the timing of the whole issue.
Sure. Let me now welcome Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, Director General Research and Information System for Developing Countries, to the program. Professor, welcome, and thank you for joining us on the program. The previous speakers have said that the onus to take the ties forward between India and the ASEAN countries is on India. What is it that India can offer going forward?
I think there are two issues absolutely clear, Frank. One definitely is that onus is on us in terms of encouraging, as Commodore Uday Bhaskar said, encouraging our private sector to play a sort of important role in terms of tapping on this opportunity of RCEP. But let me also mention here that ASEAN is waiting not just for having India on board, but also for the market. And that gives a huge opportunity for our ASEAN partners. The fact that goods and service agreement are on the table and they require the necessary endorsement that they deserve. And just 1 week back when we were sitting in Jakarta with the think tank network of the ASEAN-India group, we discussed the possibility of how big is this opportunity for some of the ASEAN countries to enter in. So services sector, where most of the discussions are stalled, I think if you pick up the figures, you find that from 37% in Cambodia to 75% in Singapore, services is extremely important sector for almost all the ASEAN countries. So it is not just for India that we are talking of RCEP. RCEP is equally important for ASEAN. And I think given the kind of recessionary tendencies that are there, not only across Western countries, but also across Japan and South Korea, the centrality of ASEAN, but importance of India within that ambit should not be undermined at all.
Sure. Let's not forget a third player as well, Pramit Chaudhuri, China. How closely will China be watching what's happening in New Delhi over the next 3 days?
Well, I don't think China will, as others have mentioned, be too worried about the economic relationship. It's a small fraction of what China already has with Southeast Asia on almost every front. They will be looking at the strategic relationship much more than anything else. Let's put it this way. Traditionally in India, we've had one very core member who has been our strongest partner, and that is Singapore within ASEAN. We've had a testy relationship with Malaysia and Indonesia in the past, and an indifferent relationship with the Indo-China countries, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, a little too far away, and Brunei as well. And then we've had an okay relationship with Thailand, no strategic content though, mainly economics and tourism. And Myanmar has been a sort of on and off relationship for us. Today, I would argue that Myanmar, Singapore, Vietnam are very much interested. I would argue these three are most interested in a strategic relationship. They see India as both an economic, but more importantly as a geopolitical partner for them because of their own concerns regarding China in particular.
So there's a lot of scope there is what you're suggesting.
And the country I think that has really begun to move where we're seeing real movement is Indonesia. Indonesia and India have been sort of flirting with each other for some time, but there's always been a certain inherent rivalry for various reasons between the two countries. But last week, for example, we saw the first India-Indonesia security dialogue. During the Raisina dialogue, we saw the Indonesian Navy chief join the Quad Navy chiefs, though he was making it very clear he wasn't there to antagonize China, but the fact he was there and he'd accepted being on the podium. On the other hand, but I would argue, and nowhere in none of these ASEAN countries has any sense of hostility towards India. Even Malaysia, which often was one of our most difficult ASEAN countries, used to criticize us on Kashmir, is now quite benign about this, even though they are not particularly anti-Chinese either. But so China is looking at this as And what I think we're seeing with ASEAN, look at the countries that ASEAN has had a similar 10-leader meeting with. It's had them with Russia, South Korea, the United States, China, and India. So it's basically saying these are 5 large external players in our region who we want to have a genuinely strong relationship on all fronts, partly because within ASEAN there's a sense we need to balance these, and the country we have to really balance against is China, because it is overwhelmingly the most powerful nation among all of these 5 in the region.
Sure. Ambassador, what is it that we can offer that China can't?
Yeah, you talked about the strategic content and China's importance. I think ASEAN is losing its internal cohesion as far as China is concerned. So some countries look at China in a very benign way, and some countries like Philippines or Vietnam, etc., have a different view. So I think that India's strategic relations will not be very strong with ASEAN as a group, because ASEAN itself has so many differences. They have not been able to finalize their statements, etc., on contentious issues. So strategic content will continue to be on bilateral basis, whether it is with Singapore or whether it is with Vietnam, and perhaps also with Indonesia, because they also have concerns. So I think that there we should not be very ambitious, and and China, of course, is the big elephant in the room. Every country is concerned about China. All the countries do look at India as some kind of a balancer if things go wrong, and that is our great asset. That none of these ASEAN countries feel threatened by India. We don't have any bilateral issues with them. We are a benign power, and that is our strength. That cultural relations are there.
And even Prime Minister Modi at Davos said our philosophy is peace.
Our philosophy is peace. So on that foundation we build, but ASEAN strategic partnership will have economic content more and real security and defense content perhaps less as a group.
Sure, yes, Commodore.
May I just add to that and say that what is it that India can either bring to the table or offer to the ASEAN countries in the strategic realm? I think, a very innovative way is the phrase that Prime Minister Modi has used over the last 3 years, and that is Sagar, security and growth for all in the region. Because just as Pramit and I think Skand also pointed out, for the ASEAN countries, the comfort level with India is very high, in the sense that there is anxiety about China. Even those countries in ASEAN that are deemed to be close to China are doing so under a degree of duress, perhaps. Maybe that's not the best thing to say when you have the 10 leaders here, because we know which countries we're talking about. But I think with India, they have a very comfortable political relationship and a very long and rich historical association, which is almost a millennia.
The cultural ties cannot be ruled out.
1,000 years old. I mean, the interesting part about ASEAN, which I think we in India need to remind ourselves, that of all the 10 countries, barring Vietnam, which has the equivalent of a cynic or a Chinese kind of influence, the other 9 have a cultural DNA that is linked to India. And I think this is something we need to remind ourselves and convey to them in a persuasive way. And on the security front, I think the maritime domain is the most logical kind of area where India can bring something to the table. All the ASEAN countries remember India's response in December 2004 when we had the tsunami. We have a modest capability, but it can be used in a very, I would say, effective way for the common good. And I think if we can focus on military training in the naval and maritime domain in the first instance, and not get into this business of the Quad, which has a different political kind of connotation, but pick up Indonesia. I think Pramit's point about Indonesia is very well taken. That's an underexploited bilateral. The Indonesian leadership now is also very, very conscious about their status in the maritime domain. So without quite making it anti-Chinese.
And they all have a lot at stake.
Yeah, absolutely. So without making it anti-Chinese, I think we should build up the capability of Indonesia, particularly for an apolitical objective, which is humanitarian assistance, disaster relief. Vietnam is also very keen to engage with India in the military training sector. I think we should pick this up, and again I repeat, before the Modi government finishes its term, whether they call a snap election or they do the full term, we identify the low-hanging fruit with ASEAN. The economic and trade RCEP should be given the highest priority.
Sure.
And over the next few months, I think we should do important bilaterals and plurilaterals, not Quad, but maybe pick up a Myanmar, an Indonesia, a Thailand, and do a BIMSTEC naval exercise or a maritime exercise to show that we can do something tangible.
Sure. You know, we've all spoken about bilateral, but Professor, what are the strengths of ASEAN as a bloc and how can we tap the potential?
I think three things, Frank, are extremely important here for us to strategize when we are thinking of engaging with ASEAN. Number one, and I think as was just now mentioned, our individual bilateral is extremely important as a building block for our engagement with ASEAN. Indonesia, to begin with, certainly would be a great choice. With our Act East and Northeast, Thailand, Myanmar are obvious choices for us. So picking up on bilaterals for a building block to ASEAN is extremely important, and that's point number one. Point number two is emphasizing on all the three channels that this government has been emphatic about. It's about culture, commerce, and connectivity. So that I think is absolutely essential. RCEP, no RCEP, whatever policy choice, but definitely in these three areas, we need to concretize and we should move firm on that. Third point is in terms of the areas of engagement that Prime Minister has emphasized in Davos, and again, all the three areas that PM has emphasized on terrorism, multilateralism in trade, and of course, climate change. Here, the idea of International Solar Alliance, etc. These give you enough maneuvering space to engage with these countries. Having said that, it is also important for us to see that ASEAN retains the centrality in the East Asia Summit process. The fact that there are attempts by specific actors in the region through their mega projects trying to create rift within ASEAN, and several countries are quite apprehensive about it. There are discussions. So what President of Indonesia has come up with, this idea of Indonesia being a fulcrum in the context is extremely important. They
Sure.
are apprehensive of not only on one side of China, but Australia on the other hand. So we require this assurance in the region and greater emphasis on Indo-Pacific as a free, prosperous, open region requires to be re-articulated time and again when we sit down. And fortunately, Japan is on board with us when we are talking about initiatives like Asia-Africa Growth Corridor and similar such initiatives.
Indeed. You know, taking the discussion forward now, Pramit, what are the other areas of potential development that need to be tapped into?
Well, India will be hoping that in the joint statement that there will be a fairly strong language on counterterrorism. And in particular, India has been trying to ensure that specifically Pakistani terror groups like Lashkar are actually mentioned in similar joint statements as we have done with other countries. And that will be important for us. And I think that on that front, we'll see a fair amount. Maritime security has been mentioned. The terminology of the Indo-Pacific and the idea of increasing maritime cooperation with countries, not those that are bordering the Indian Ocean, but those which are also bordering the South China Sea. We'll be looking at something on that front. And connectivity in the broader sense. We're looking both in terms of more airline connectivity. We're still, trilateral highway is a big hope, but we have to get through Upper Burma and through the northeast of India, which is very, very difficult. I believe, if I'm correct, between the Indian border and Mandalay alone, 70 bridges have to be built and they're being one by one connected for this highway to even reach the first stage. But the point about the connectivity is, in the long run, it builds a sense that India is serious about the relationship, because one of the key problems a lot of these countries, definitely Myanmar, for example, has with India is that you've promised us these connectivity projects since the 1950s, and nothing has happened. When I went with Manmohan Singh to Myanmar on his first state visit there, and we signed all these joint statements, I asked Myanmar officials, I said, well, how do you like them? They said, well, we've seen these all before. We've seen them in 1960, 1950, 1970, 1980, 1990, and nothing has happened. You've never fulfilled a single one of these projects. So now, one of the good things about a lot of this is that Japan has joined us. And Japan has enormous credibility because they're very good at getting things done. So that builds that sense in the long run that India is actually a serious country in this region in a way that we haven't really been there before.
Sure. Okay, time now to get closing comments from all my guests, beginning with you, Ambassador. How successful have we been in implementing our Act East policy, and how is it different from our Look East policy?
There has been a huge gap between promises and performance. I think India's credibility is at stake as far as trilateral highway is concerned. We should get the Japanese as well as the Koreans, because these bridges which are in Myanmar are very, very difficult to make. And the Koreans are known to work in inhospitable environment. They are very good engineers. So India should try to bring in Japanese and Korean money and technology, work with Myanmar to complete this trilateral highway. Now the date has been pushed back to 2019. But if you talk to knowledgeable people, they say even 2019 is not feasible. So the Modi government and they must try to fully focus on completing the trilateral highway. If we do not have the technology and the money, get the Japanese and the Koreans.
Sure. So delivering on these projects is the way to go ahead, is what you're suggesting. Commodore, has there been a major policy shift looking east over the last few years?
Well, I would say Look East itself was a very important initiative. We go back to Prime Minister Narasimha Rao's period. Now, from then onwards, I think every Prime Minister has sought to give it a certain kind of traction. And when you say closing comment, I'd like to again flag the maritime domain and say that when Prime Minister Modi took office in 2014, he had focused on the maritime domain in a very, I would say, innovative manner. Now, I think is the time to build on the credibility that we have, as I said, 2004 and the tsunami, and all the ASEAN interactions that we've had have seen India as a country that can bring something to the table in terms of its naval capability. I think if this can be taken forward, it would be a way of demonstrating the point that both Pramit and Skanda made, that we should be seen to be delivering on the promises made by the Prime Minister, whether it's in Manila or in Davos. That's where I think the Indian ecosystem needs to do better than what it has in all these years. And my plea is, look at the maritime domain. Those are your strengths. You can build on them.
Okay, so that's the way forward is what you're suggesting. So. Okay, Professor, what would India like to take away from this summit?
I think number one definitely is closer partnership with ASEAN. There is no second way. We would have to be very close to ASEAN countries. They should feel confident. And for that, I think adequate response from our trade negotiators in the realm of RCEP definitely is one. But second and much more important is to deliver on the projects, as has been very rightly mentioned. The government has already streamlined the delivery mechanisms. We need to strengthen. We have seen the effect of Prime Minister's willpower in Salma Dam and other long pending projects in Afghanistan. And I'm sure once Prime Minister puts his weight behind, more deliveries would be expected. But as the emphasis is, greater connect for Northeast when we talk about Act East definitely is going to be delivered, and I'm sure it would move in that direction.
Pramit, your closing comment on the way forward.
One of the things that I think we need to do is now, a lot of these ASEAN countries, as has been mentioned, have already started to conclude the future is China. The Americans seem to be withdrawing or at least becoming really erratic. And we need to be, now we don't have the capacity to match China in many spheres, definitely not on the economic side, but we can do symbolic things. And so here's a simple example. When the Philippines took on the Chinese in the South China Sea, the China's response was, among other things, to block, for example, Philippines' agricultural exports, particularly bananas and mangoes, into China and cripple Philippines' economy. Now, we can't buy Philippines bananas, but one of the things that the Chinese did is they insisted that the Filipino bananas had certain diseases. But the Filipinos didn't have the technical capacity to fight the Chinese in the WTO on this argument. And it's one of the areas we could have helped them. We could have come in and sent a team, it's perfectly feasible within our capacity, to send a team of scientists, say, we'll build a case for you to fight the Chinese. We did, however, help when, for example, a hurricane typhoon hit the Philippines.
Sure.
China said we're not going to give Philippines any aid to punish them. We sent a C-130, just one aircraft, nothing major. We could definitely weren't able to help that many people, just one aircraft. But symbolically, it was powerful. And it was page one in all the Philippines newspapers.
Sure.
Chinese have said, screw you, but the Indians have arrived. And next week, the Chinese turned around and said, okay, we'll give you aid.
Okay,
right?
So that's the way forward is what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
All right, on that note, then we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. That's it from me. See you again next time.